My name's Ella Glendining. I am the writer, co-director and star of Pyramid of Disunion, which I co-directed with Jessi Gutch.
Who has now done my intro. So, Pyramid of Disunion is based on, I guess it's sort of, a lot of Ella's work is like semi-autobiographical, and it's based in an eco-commune, which I think was a really fun setting for the film. Could be a bit wacky and eccentric with it. And then I guess the love part, maybe you can explain.
Well, the love part, I mean, it was the brief. They wanted us to make stories of disabled love. So yeah, I wanted to make something a bit silly and irreverent. It's nice, it's light, and I think we don't see enough of that with, stories about disabled people.
I think this is about falling in love with yourself.
Yes,
that can
no,
sound,
absolutely
but it
is
about falling in love with your disabled self, I think, and kind of F the F boys.
Yeah, that's all right, Jessi. Thank you. It is. I think this is a very unique film. Well, I know it is. It's absolutely bonkers. I think it's really refreshing and subversive what my character does in the story.
And the subtleties of it.
Subtle, and it's very unsubtle.
Yeah.
Battery is a queer road movie with electric wheelchairs about climate change, about queer love, queer joy, all set in a kind of apocalyptic universe after there's been a climate disaster, about the last electric wheelchair battery in the world. Not much in 15 minutes, really.
My involvement in the film is because I love Tom, and I previously had worked with Tom on a monologue for television, and it's the first time we'd kind of worked together, and it was a very enjoyable experience. So that's what got me involved in Tom's film. It's about love, and just about everybody, if we're lucky enough, kind of experience love and can identify with that. So the kind of specifics of that it's two young disabled men is secondary to the kind of universal theme.
To explore love in terms of climate change felt a really good metaphor for just looking at the way we all have become kind of exhausted and can love out against a really difficult subject. Really felt like a lovely MacGuffin to examine love in that way, I suppose.
So FIEND is a kind of dark comedy sci-fi film, which is basically exploring the idea of what lengths you would go to for somebody that you love to understand them better. And so we kind of set the film in a waiting room scenario. It feels very kind of mundane, a woman just waiting for an appointment, and slowly but surely everything becomes more kind of overwhelming and tipping into the surreal, so that she kind of really hits a breaking point. And it turns out that basically she's been in a neurodiverse simulation to kind of understand what life would be like for her partner. We really wanted to kind of give that audiovisual neurodiverse experience in the film.
I think it was really important to try and capture the sort of overwhelming feelings that can occur in sort of having neurodiverse tendencies and sort of navigating relationships with those. So I think we kind of wanted to make sure it felt quite visceral. And so a lot of that was with the sound design and some fun camera play.
Yeah. I really hope that this film can kind of really open up some of those kind of conversations around the fact that we have bad burnout and we have difficulties with social cues. And I think those are things that our industry really needs to start addressing, of what the accommodations are that need to be made around those things.
Mohart's Kira is a high school rom-com, and it's about the incredibly shy Mo, who has a massive crush on her classmate, who is a really big disability influencer on TikTok. And it's now the final leavers dance, so it's Mo's literal last chance to tell her how she feels. And that's what she's going to try and do in her short with the help of a lot of her friends. Matilda Binney is the co-writer, and she's also a playwright, and I directed a play of hers in 2019, and we just immediately became partners in crime. We spoke to each other about what's the films that we wish we'd seen, and we're both queer, and we were like, we're both disabled. We were just like, what's the thing that we wish we'd seen? And it's something that embraces the reality of disability, which is that often it's funny and absurd and dynamic. and you maybe were incredibly shy in school, but actually your personality inside was massive. We really wanted to make a love story that had disability all the way through it, but isn't about disability and was ultimately not about trauma or suffering or extreme pain, but a kind of quite everyday universal problem of fancying someone who doesn't seem to fancy you back.
In some ways, it's just important to like highlight the statistics of it, because I think a lot of the time people don't actually realise that 1/5 of the UK population is disabled, and then within that there are so many intersections of disability. Like me and Ella have had such different experiences of like disability, but then there's a kind of kinship there and an understanding that is kind of, I suppose, against ableism ultimately. And I think what these 4 films do, which is really amazing, is that they're all incredibly different disabilities, neurodivergents, but they have a kind of kinship together as a program, which I think is really exciting.
I wonder if the audience are going to realise that what they might have thought was a unique perspective is actually a universal one. And I think the most radical thing that you can do with disability is shift to realising that it's essentially the social model. Like the problem isn't the person in disability, the problem is the lack of a ramp or the way that we maybe always done things. You know, and that becomes the thing that's actually the challenge. You know, think about what are the challenges of making this film. Probably the same as every other film, like trying to nail a comedic beat, you know, trying to find a location that really suits you. And actually that's proof that like the disability being framed as a problem is something in the past now. The problem is when you're missing stories and people that should be on our screens.
I hope that an audience are left with some hope at the end of the film, despite the backdrop that it's set against of the climate disaster. Yeah, I hope they really fall in love with our main couple, and I really hope that they realise that although our main 2 protagonists face a hell of a lot of barriers, their disabilities, they're not one of them. You know, that's the least interesting thing about them, and I hope that makes it a fun and a moving experience.